Couple of developments on that Manston Asylum Processing Centre just in the last few minutes. 4 Select Committee chairs have written to Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary. 2 of them are Conservatives, and they're talking about their deep concerns about the dire conditions at Manston. They're talking about treatment of the vulnerable, use of force and restraint, detention that is carrying on too long. We're also hearing that the PCS union, the Civil Service Union, might well be close to trying to judicially review the Home Office, taking the government to court. As you said, this all came up at question time. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, not surprisingly perhaps, talking about a asylum system that was broken, given that Suella Braverman had said exactly that on Monday. The Prime Minister responded at only a second Prime Minister's questions by trying to say the government had a record to be proud of on immigration, and he didn't distance himself from the Home Secretary.
The Home Secretary and I, when it comes to tackling on migration, reducing migration, we are on the same page. That party's policy, it's a blank page, Mr. Speaker.
Of all the people who arrived in small boats last year, how many asylum claims have been processed?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do need. Mr. Speaker, not enough is the answer, very straightforwardly. Not enough. And that's what we're going to fix.
Well, the Prime Minister said there was a plan for dealing with the asylum system, but when you press number 10 on what the plan is it by any chance related to the 10-point plan on immigration that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, outlined when he was contesting the leadership of the Conservative Party this summer? They say, well, as for the promises he made then, he's definitely committed to the sentiment of them. And when you ask about the 2019 manifesto, they say he's committed to the promise, not the promises, the promise of that manifesto. He's committed in a way to some of the slogans, but not necessarily clear on the detail. There is a great sense with this government at the moment that it is work in progress. And you got that also when the Prime Minister U-turned on his decision on whether or not to go to the COP27 summit in Egypt. He has decided to go. The suggestion is that's because he's more comfortable with the progress that has been made on the autumn statement that Jeremy Hunt is going to give later this month. But yet again, you feel this is a government that is more sort of wet clay than set concrete.
Gary, thanks very much. Well, with the Prime Minister now going to that COP27 summit, I'm joined by one of the UK's lead negotiators at last year's conference. Nigel Topping is the UK's high-level champion on climate change. Mr Topping, this change of heart by the Prime Minister, how important is it that he is going?
Well, just to correct, I wasn't one of the lead negotiators. I have a UN role as a high-level climate action champion, working with the businesses and cities, etc., around the world. But I would say this is a really important change of heart. I'm delighted to see the Prime Minister going. You know, the UK is still the president of the COP process until the first day when it hands over to Egypt. So it's a very important signal of a commitment to the process. And I think a chance to inject some real ambition and urgency into that World Leaders Summit at the beginning, given that UK has got one of the most ambitious plans to reduce emissions by nearly 80%
and would you
by
like
2035.
Would you like to see the King attend now, given his interest in all this?
I think it's probably too late, given the complexities of security arrangements. You know, the King's holding, I think, a really important meeting in Buckingham Palace on Friday, where about 200 leaders from governments, businesses, civil society will come together. Really as a sort of springboard to Sharm el-Sheikh. I think it would have been great if he was there. He's a known leader in this area, and the Egyptians would have loved to have him there. But I think it's probably too late to change that.
Well, I'm sure that's a shame, and you're clearly disappointed. But if Sunak had made this decision earlier, he could have been there. And the fact is, isn't it, that the Prime Minister was shamed into attending? And you know, he's made clear what he thinks of the whole climate change agenda by getting rid of Alok Sharma, the COP president, from the cabinet. You know, his heart's not really in all this, is it?
I don't know. I think the proof of the pudding's in the eating, as they say. We have this review that Chris Skidmore is carrying out into the business competitiveness issues around getting to zero.
The Tory MP.
What I would say is that we're clearly now seeing that this is a competitiveness issue. You know, the 2 of the 4 biggest economies in the world, Germany and California, are committed to net zero 2045. India and China doubling their electric vehicle sales every year. So this is really going fast. So it's not just a question of environmentally reducing emissions. That's the reason that we started this whole process. But it's now a question of who's going to win the competitive race to build the zero carbon products that the future economy is going to run on.
You know, I wonder whether the government's got the message on that, because they've only recently changed their mind and reinstated the fracking ban, are continuing to issue oil and gas licences. How are you going to get that message across better to the government that it can actually boost the economy to invest in green technology?
Well, I mean, all the economic analysis shows that there's a big economic prize. I mean, one of the reasons that the phasing out of combustion engines was brought earlier was that the Climate Change Committee showed that that would be better macroeconomically for the UK government. So, I mean, what I try and do is show to ministers who will listen that this is happening faster and faster and faster all around the world. Green hydrogen, green steel, sustainable aviation fuel. Sector by sector is entering what we call the exponential phase of the transition, where the transition just goes faster and faster and faster. We're used to this on things like internet and mobile phones, but we're now seeing it in the heavy industries like transport, steel and power.
Just standing back, you saw Alok Sharma virtually in tears at the end of COP26 when India and China intervened to try and water down attempts to end the use of coal power. Since then, it feels as if things have gone backwards as countries around the world prioritise cost of living, whether that means green power or not. Are you pretty bleak about the prospects for COP27?
No, I think you have to really distinguish between some of the short-term actions because of the crisis of energy availability because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which means people are kind of burning anything they get their hands on. So there is more coal and gas being burnt now than would have been otherwise. But that's not the same as the solutions to the cost of living crisis. Of course, the cost of living crisis is caused by the high and volatile costs of fossil fuels. And the solution is the low and stable cost of renewable energy. So we're actually seeing an increase in investment in renewables. So there's a short-term get through the crisis, and then, but actually this is having the effect of speeding up the transition.
Nigel Topping, thank you very much for joining us.